Hey, I want to speak about a controversial subject. This is slightly going off my trend of videos in the past few days, but um, I always made a sort of, let's say, promise to myself that if there was something on my mind that I felt needed to be spoken about, I would speak about it, without fear of political correctness or offending anyone or anything like that. I mean, I never seek to offend people, but what I'm saying is I don't censor my own videos, let's put it that way. So the subject I want to talk about is a pretty controversial one, and it's about race baiting. All I would ask, before you jump to conclusions with this video, because I can already predict some of the responses, all I ask is that you hear me out until the end. If you still disagree, fine. Um, one more thing, I'll allow dissenting comments. I'll allow people who disagree with me, but I'm not going to allow any comments that attack me or slander me as something that I'm not. I'm just not going to allow them. Um, Especially when I'm making my position abundantly clear. Any arguments that disagree with me, fair enough, but I would ask you to explain why. Because I'm going to try and be objective here. Yeah, but I want to talk about the issue of race baiting. Now, this has been a very topical issue. I mean, race relations and racism and race baiting in general, in especially in the United States in the last 2 or 3 years, but it's not unique to America. It's prominent in America, but it's not unique to America. Um, Firstly, a disclaimer: in no way is anything that I'm about to say in this video intended to trivialize actual racism. I think racism is abhorrent. I always have. I've had a consistent track record on this. If you don't believe me, feel free to check out previous videos. I hate racism. I think it's a stupid way of thinking to judge someone based on something that is beyond their control. I think it's just stupid. But to cite an example of why I think this is getting out of hand, um, at the end of last year, I've just watched a video because it came up on the thumbnail. There was a charity boxing match between the former Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney and Evander Holyfield. Now, clearly, this was intended to be a light-hearted event, and it was for a good cause. It was for a blind foundation. I forget the exact name, but it was basically to help prevent blindness. Get the sort of whether it was in America or in developing countries, I don't know. But whatever the case, it's clearly for a good cause, right? Now, Mitt Romney is in his 60s. Um, from what I know, he's got no previous boxing experience. Um, he's a tall guy, and I'm sure he was quite athletic in his youth, but he has no previous boxing experience and he's in his 60s. He's going up against one of the greatest heavyweights of modern times, um, who is a bit younger but still old for a boxer. I think Holyfield's about 52 now. So anyway, clearly this was never going to be a serious fight. And if you look at the footage, it's clearly intended to be a bit of pantomime. But you know what? It's for a good cause and it's all good natured. Obviously, they're not going to put Romney in a situation whereby Holyfield's going to be throwing real deadly punches as he would with a professional boxer. Um, so it was all good intentions, etc. Everyone's happy. The crowd's happy. Both men are getting into the spirit of things, etc. So how sad it is and how unfortunate that some idiots have to crawl out of the woodwork and bring race into it under the in the comments section. That's what I'm going on. But I do think comment threads tend to demonstrate quite a lot. I know it doesn't represent everyone, but they still give a picture of what a lot of people are thinking. And the sort of comments I'm seeing are things like, "Oh, you'll be the second black man to beat him," referring to Obama, of course. You know, I'm far worse than that. That I'm not even going to repeat. It just this pisses me off because are these people so blinded by their tunnel vision that they cannot just see this event for what it was, which was a light-hearted event for charity? I mean, that just that's just one example, but there's many others. Um, you know, I've seen this. I've seen it a lot in boxing videos where there has been no racism whatsoever. I saw it on a video with the Vitaly Klitschko-Lennox Lewis fight. A lot of people were trying to claim that there was racism involved because the fight was ended early or something like that. This is ridiculous. If you know anything about the Klitschko brothers, these guys are very liberal thinking. There's not a racist bone in their body. So to slander someone like Vitaly Klitschko as a racist, that really made me angry because it was just so far off that it was rubbish. Um, so this sort of race baiting you can see in sporting circles. Obviously, I'm mentioning boxing because it's a sport I follow, but you do see it in other circles as well. Um, but you know what pisses me off is people who whose entire world outlook has to be about race. Every single thing has to be about race for them. Um, And I think some of these people go around with a victimhood mentality. I recently had, I mentioned trolls a while back. I recently had a disagreement with someone. I forget what the issue was about. That's not particularly important. But it wasn't a race-related issue. It was something else. Um, and the guy kept referring to me. That actually it was a boxing video, and the guy was actually insulting Manny Pacquiao fans, and he was coming out with racist, genuine racist statements about Filipinos because he was calling them rice-eating peasants, all this sort of thing. Now that's genuine racism, right? Because it's focusing on their nationality, it's focusing on their ethnicity, and for some reason, he thought I was a Filipino. I said I wasn't. I'm a white British guy, whatever. Um, so I challenged him. I said, "Look, you're coming out with this racist trash. How do you justify this?" And then he said, "Oh, I'm black, so I can't be racist." And this one really gets me. I think, wait a second. You're coming out with racist statements, and you're trying to tell yourself that you're not being racist. This is rubbish. Then, of course, when I identified myself, then he started going on about my skin pigmentation, like, you know, going on about white guys and all sort of crap. And it just I really have zero respect for people who do that. I think it's cowardly. Why is it cowardly? Because they've nothing else to go on. It's the desperate measure to try and slander someone with something as loaded as racism. And I think not only is it dangerous because you're slandering someone's reputation, but it actually mitigates the word itself. And it trivializes actual racism. Now, at the start of the video, I said video is not intended to ignore those issues. I do believe that racism exists in the world, and I believe there's plenty of examples of racism in the United States, for example, and elsewhere. But I have no respect for people who cry racism when there is no racism to be found. That is cowardly, it's pathetic, and these people need to be challenged, especially by their own community. And by their own community, I'm talking about, well, for example, other black people. Um, so respect, for example, I'm not talking about his politics, but I respect Ben Carson for calling these people out because he has been doing that. I'm not saying there aren't issues to be raised, but I'm talking about like organizations like Black Lives Matter. They started off presumably with understandable intentions to raise issue about the disproportionate number of young black men being shot by the police. But I think there's more to this organization than they let on. And I think liberal-minded people have to be wary about associating themselves with a group that not so long ago was openly calling for the police to be killed. Now, that's not going to help anybody. This is an organization that even jeered its own political supporters, Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley, who are among the most liberal American politicians I can think of. You know, those guys came to support the event. They were jeered off the stage. This is disgraceful. What sort of warped thinking is that that you're going to jeer the very people who support your movement? So when I saw that, I lost all sympathy. I had a little bit of sympathy for the movement at the beginning, but when they jeered the very people who support them, I thought, well, wait a second. Well, what is your real agenda here? Um, and I think sometimes the media is guilty of it. I think sometimes the media, and I'm saying the media in a collective sense because most outlets are guilty of this, um, of creating a racism dynamic where it isn't there. Um, that's not to say that you never get examples of politicians or public figures using racist language. I'm not saying that never happens. Um, But I really think everyone just needs to calm the fuck down and put things into context. Now, with this issue in America with police killings and the killings of police and this constant cycle, I'm not for a second trivializing that. There's some very serious issues going on here. They need to be debated and they need to be confronted. But I'm so sick of people who have to turn every single situation into a racism situation. The first thing we need to do is recognize, firstly, that if this is truly to be a principle that society takes seriously, then anybody is capable of doing it. I have zero respect for people who say something like, I'm black, so I can't be a racist. To those people, I say, fuck you. Yes, you can. If you hate Asians, if you hate white people, and if you hate Hispanics, you're by definition a racist. I don't hide behind um, your victimhood mentality. Because number one, you don't represent all black people. And number two, your theory falls flat because nobody, this is why, nobody can choose what ethnic group they're born into. That's a universal fact. And if anyone thinks I'm just focusing on the black community, that applies to any group that plays the race card. It also applies to white supremacists who harp on about the so-called white genocide, which I think is a disgraceful use of that term. And it applies to anybody. I'm so sick of these people who pollute the world with their warped thinking, who drive divisions between people. Um, there's no doubt that there's serious issues to be addressed, but every politician has to be responsible in this regard. So, for especially the Democrats, have to be responsible in who they are endorsing. That doesn't mean they should ignore the issues, and it doesn't mean they should ignore valid anger at, for example, police abusing the power, situations like that. I don't agree that there's no issue to be had here, because I do think there's circumstances where police go across the line. On the other hand, um, I don't believe that every one of these young black men being killed are completely innocent. I just don't think that weighs up to the facts. I mean, there was, I forget which state, but a police sheriff made a very valid point that these sort of movements demanding equality couldn't name a single murder victim, but they could name those shot by the police. Now, it doesn't mean that two wrongs don't make a right, but the point is this is selective outrage. So why do they not shed the same tears, for example, for murder victims within the black community? Um, if you are black and you're upset by anything I'm saying here, all I'm asking you is please listen to what I'm saying. I'm not saying there is no issues to be had. What I'm saying is this constant focus on race um, is not going to help anyone. Am I saying that there's no racial issue here? I'm not saying that for a second, but I'm saying that constantly focusing on it and saying that it is the case in every single case is not accurate. I mean, how do you script? What about, for example, a black officer who shoots someone? Is that racism? You know, um, and some of the most conservative and hardline cops I've seen have been black cops, actually. So these people just really piss me off because I don't think that they're helping anybody. I'm not saying that they have no right to be angry about some of the things that are going on, but I do question the motivation and I do question if this is all about equality or if there's something else going on here. Um, and I'm sick of it. I really am. I'm sick as a white guy of being slandered alongside white supremacists. Like, oh, all you whites are the same. If that's your mentality, I feel sorry for you. I really do. And that applies to anyone who views the world through this tunnel vision of race. Get over yourselves. Grow up. Seriously. If you've personally experienced racism, you have my sympathy. But that's no excuse to take it out with this bitterness into the wider world and hate every member of that ethnic group. Okay? So if you go into the world believing all white people are the same, the problem is yours. Entirely yours. If you've had a problem with white police officers, I can understand you having an issue with the police, but don't blame all white people for that. Because for one thing, there's many white Americans who have joined those marches, you know? Um, and, I keep hearing things like, whenever I get into a debate with these people online, they always throw, oh, you people were lynching black men in the 20s. Excuse me, but number one, I'm not American. Number two, even if I was, that's to pin that on me personally is bullshit. You know, I really do believe that we need to learn from history, we need to recognize history, but you cannot blame today's generation for what their ancestors done, especially since it's based on crude generalizations. I mean, this is not just a white and black thing, it applies all over the world. It's like some Chinese today hold a very racist attitude towards all Japanese because of wartime atrocities. And, that's a stupid way of thinking. You can buy T-shirts in China depicting and basically dehumanizing the Japanese. But I don't want to be too negative in this video, so I've seen optimistic signs as well. Recently, I had a dinner with two friends, a Chinese guy and a Japanese guy. They get on very well. That's nice to see, and I wish we could see more of that in the world. And both guys are open-minded. The Chinese guy was saying he wants world peace, and his favorite country is Japan. So for me, that's very refreshing to see. And the Japanese guy was being very amicable as well. Um, I honestly believe that although America does have deep divisions now, there's far more Americans that just want to get on with their lives, both black and white, than these people who are constantly trying to wedge divisions. Now, I'm not saying that there's no issues. I'm not sort of pretending I'm putting up a blinder and saying there's no issues out there because there are. But what I am saying is don't don't translate those issues as being the case in every single case. So every time that a black guy gets shot by the police, it doesn't mean that it's because he's black. Okay, and that's the narrative at the moment. And the likes of Black Lives Matter are pushing this agenda to drive divisions. Now, to be fair, the police maybe aren't helping either. I think they could also be probably doing a bit more. But I don't think Black Lives Matter. I was sympathetic to them at first because I could understand where their outrage was. But now I'm starting to see that they're serving a lot more to just drive divisions in society, and I think that needs to be challenged. Um, and I'm not just focusing on the United States. Occasionally, you see it in Britain as well. Maybe not quite as often, but the bottom line is this: if if someone has a world outlook that is entirely based on someone's skin pigmentation, then what does that say about that person? It demonstrates they're deeply insecure. I mean, how can you go through life avoiding or hating an entire racial group, especially if you're living in a big, this is a very cosmopolitan world, okay? So if you're living in somewhere like New York City or Los Angeles or London for that matter, you must be a very bitter, paranoid individual to hate an entire race. How can you even practically survive that way? You go into a bank, you go into a shop. What are you going to do if someone from a different ethnic group that you don't like? Are you going to go to the next hill? How are you going to handle life? Okay? So I'm talking to everybody. I'm referring to everybody who has this mindset. I'm also talking in absolutely the same terms about white supremacists who constantly go on about the so-called genocide. There is no genocide of white people. That's one of their main narratives, and it's bullshit. Okay? I'm a white guy. I don't feel threatened. Um, but I don't want to say hate because I want to rise above them, but I've no respect for people who go through life with this victimhood, race baiting mentality. I've no time for it. I don't think it helps anyone. I don't think it takes on the genuine problems of racism. I think where there is definite racism, where it's clearly audible racism, that should be condemned and challenged. And I think public figures who espouse racism should face consequences, especially if they're working with people from a diverse range of backgrounds. But I'm tired of certain people in the media and certain pressure groups constantly playing the victimhood card and constantly trying to drive this division between people. So I'll leave it there, but I'm sick of it. And just a general statement to anyone who thinks that they can make me feel bad or whatever. I shit you out. You're nothing to me. Don't think you intimidate me, and don't think you've got any moral high ground over me. You don't know me, Okay? You've got nothing on me. As far as I'm concerned, you're just an angry moron who is using his or her race as a way to hide from your own insecurity. Okay? Um, and I don't need history lessons. I am very familiar with the terrible things that happened in the past, and to some extent, some of the things that are going on today. But the difference between me and you is I don't judge an entire group as one. Okay? And I really, really think these people need to be alienated and challenged and definitely not given airtime. Let me know your thoughts.